This is Timrat,
Yes.
which is an intentional community which was originally founded about more than 25 years ago, close to 30 now.
Yeah.
It's a self-contained community, about 400 families. And I came here in 1995. But you know, I go back and forth between Timrat and New York City, or the area near New York City, on a fairly regular basis. I spend 3 months in each place, and they're very different places. But this is where I paint. Yeah, but New York I find very distracting. I mean, New York is great for all the museums and the galleries and the people, but I do very little artistic work there. Creation, I do very little there in terms of painting. But I have another profession, which is psychiatry, psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, and that I'm able to do in both places. I can do that in New York, and I can do that here in Israel, or in Timrat, or Tel Aviv for that matter. I think a lot, and my painting helps me think, and my thinking interferes with my painting.
So it's both sides.
It's both sides, but it's antagonistic. And for a long time I felt that I really couldn't do both, that one interfered with the other, and especially if I thought first and then painted. So I discovered that there was an antagonism between my thinking and my painting, that it wasn't really possible to do both at the same time, and that my thinking would interfere with my painting, but my painting, oddly enough, would not interfere with my thinking. So, you know, they have an expression in the out west, shoot first and talk later. So in my world, if I paint first, then I can think later. My thinking and my reading and my explorations, for example, as we were talking about earlier in philosophy and in psychoanalysis, are really fed by the painting I do. And also, I should say that there's a certain amount of courage that it takes to paint, art in general, but for me it's painting. It requires belief that there's something to say and that you're saying it, and it doesn't need to be formulated clearly beforehand, but it is something that is a spontaneous kind of thing. It takes a certain amount of courage or stupidity to be able to do that. And my work in psychoanalysis in particular has helped foster my courage in painting, because when you work in psychoanalysis, you work outside the box.
Yeah.
As I said earlier, I don't like to look at my patients or have my patients look at me. It interferes with the freedom, because what we're after is the unconscious, and what we're after is the real of the unconscious, and you can't get at that too easily in a face-to-face encounter, because a face-to-face encounter is designed to repress. When I paint, I just paint without thinking about the impact or the eventual effect. In fact, I don't know what I'm painting until after I've painted it. At the end, and not even at the end, sometimes it takes a long time for me to understand what I've been doing. And only recently, frankly, have I been able to really think of my work as a total oeuvre and understand, what it is that I'm doing. And it takes, to understand what I'm doing, it takes me to go into other sources. So I have to go, I read a lot. I'm very much taken with some of the recent post-critical thought of certain philosophers, and I read them a lot, and I begin to understand from the work of Zizek, for example, in Slovenia, or Giorgio Agamben in Italy, or Jacques Lacan in France, what it is that I'm doing. And it begins to make sense to me. I'm dealing with mother and child, but I'm dealing with more than that. Because what I strive for in my work is to look for and try and express what I call the real, which is something which is, for the most part, hidden by reality. Okay, the real is not reality. Real is what's concealed by reality, and it's typically something that is traumatic and sweetly horrible. There's an expression by Bialik in his book Kisoiv. How's it? Revealed and hidden by language in English. That's the English translation.
Yes.
What he calls Ema Matuka.
Ema Matuka.
The sweet horror.
Yeah.
And it is, in fact, the real, what he's talking about, which we do everything in our power as an individual and as a community to keep hidden or concealed in all kinds of different aesthetic and philosophical and political ways, all of which try and create a semblance of order, coherence, hierarchy, boundaries, and all of that is something that I, in my painting, fight against. So I begin with something that may be called a portrait of a mother and child, let's say, but what I'm seeking is something that portrait keeps typically hidden from view. Is that many of my faces are blurred.
Allegoric?
Allegoric, but at the same time representative, and also reflective of the kind of work that I do when I work with patients. What do I mean by that? I work a lot with the couch. Okay, means that my patient lies on the couch and I sit behind my patient. Means that I don't see the face.
The face. Wow, that's nice.
They don't see my face. Mm-hmm. And so many of my paintings are faceless in a certain sense, but at the same time, very revealing, because when you eliminate the face, you also eliminate the kind of illusions that are created by face-to-face encounters.
When it comes to yourself?
When it comes to anybody.
So it's
a universal phenomenon that we hide behind. Women wear makeup, men grow beards. I mean, it's a whole culture of facial subterfuge or camouflage, if you will. So to challenge that in many ways, either through disfiguration itself or by covering the face.
Tell me about the big figures all around here.
Well, these paintings come from, initially they come from my work as a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst with eating disorders, and specifically with anorexia nervosa, although I also have worked with bulimics, and sometimes they go together, both the two of them. They're from not my real patients. I mean, they're not models, they're from photographs, which are in the original black and white depiction are pretty horrible. I mean, they're pretty ugly, pretty distressed, because these are, for the most part, young women, older women, close to dying, close to death. The meaning behind that is my desire to disfigure and to deform and to make, if you want to call it, larger than life. Because I'm not interested in simply depicting life. I'm not simply interested in depicting reality again. I'm looking for the real. And to get to the real,
you have to exaggerate.
You have to exaggerate. You have to be willing to deform and challenge beauty, symmetry, the kinds of parameters that, again, are part of the culture's attempt to maintain the semblance of coherence and narrative clarity. Most of my work is figurative, of a certain kind, and that is universal. That's available wherever there are human beings. The same issues that I'm dealing with in my paintings are evident, as frankly are the same issues that I deal with in my work as a therapist, as a psychiatrist, as a psychoanalyst. They're universal issues that exist across cultures, across countries, across boundaries, and so it's not specific to any one place or any one people. Because I think as much as I am trying to get underneath reality, I find myself trapped still. It's very hard to disentangle oneself or disconnect from images that one typically sees every day or dreams about. One typically doesn't dream in abstraction, one dreams in figurative images. We're so hypnotized by those kinds of images that it's very hard to escape them. So as much as I try to, and I try to bring out what's concealed by those images, it's a long and difficult process. So I think about abstraction more and more, but abstraction not just for the sake of abstraction, but abstraction to abstract, in fact, the real from reality.
Would you be a full-time painter? Is it something?
I could see myself being a full-time painter, absolutely. In fact, there were times in my life as a practicing psychiatrist where I came close to giving up my practice of psychiatry, and because I would find myself, I had a studio in New York, and I would find myself spending hours and hours and hours and hours. Time had no meaning in the studio, and realized that I could easily give myself over to that demanding mistress, but I made a decision not to at an earlier time in my career. But at this point in my life, making a career in that profession is no longer an interesting goal.